What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we got a good one for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be going over some big name players you should be avoiding on draft day. The list today will include 4 players, 1 player at each position, a running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback. I'll throw out some honorable mentions, also let you guys know the positives as well as the negatives, so don't get it mistaken, this isn't a complete bash fest. The reason these players are big names is because they produced in the past and possibly won people championships. Now, with that said, we still don't think that any of these players should be drafted at their current ADP. We'll get into exactly why that is, but before we do, just want to take a moment to thank each of you out there for watching, listening, and subscribing. We're inching closer and closer to the start of the NFL season, and I'm not sure if you watched a video that I produced last week, but I did mention that we were going to be having a giveaway. This giveaway is to give away our draft package, and we're not necessarily limited to just giving away one. To enter, all you have to do is leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Just be sure at the end, of course, you include your Twitter handle or some other way to contact you if you do win. We do want to make sure to give you the draft package as soon as possible, but we'll touch on that a bit more later in the video, so stay tuned till the end. And for those of you that have your draft sooner, our draft package is available now. My recommendation for the best way to enter your draft as well as prepare for your draft is to take our rankings, adjust them to your liking. Although the rankings should be used as a guide, we don't want to steer you on or off a player that you're specifically high on, so make sure to adjust them accordingly. Once you've done that though, we definitely suggest for round 2 bouncing that up against our ADP report. This will let you know exactly which players are coming in at the best value on the platform you're drafting on, and from that area, you will be heading into your draft with a clear advantage over your opponents. In addition to that, we also have all the information you need for any research you could possibly want, including video player breakdowns, risk ratings, player projections. You'll also, of course, gain access to our private Discord community group, which will easily become one of the best perks as soon as the season starts. Already, it's pretty popping over there. Some people have had their drafts, others are preparing for it, but there's no doubt if you're on the fence, maybe you're unsure about a trade, posting it in there, you are going to get your question answered immediately, and Nick and I are very present throughout the week answering questions ourselves as well. So if you tag us on there, there's a good chance that we will be answering your questions. So if that's something you're interested in, that is a perk included in the package. The link for that is in the description box below, but if you guys want to enter the giveaway, stay tuned for that later. With that being said though, let's hop over to our stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was 5 running backs had double-digit receptions in a game last season: Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey, JD McKissick, but who was the 5th running back? The correct answer was actually David Johnson, Big Blue, Quad X, the first to get this right on YouTube, and on Twitter at ColinGrace15. Congratulations to both of you, but as for today's stat of the day, which team led the league in interceptions thrown per game in 2020? Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Without further ado, we'll be hopping right into the players. I do apologize for the long intro. We're inching closer to the season. I do want to make sure to touch on everything while I have all of your attention. Obviously, utilize the timestamps in the description box below if you just want to skip to the first player immediately as soon as you open the video. Those will always be in the description. And much like the timestamps being a routine with every video, we will once again begin with the player listed on the thumbnail, Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns. Currently, Nick Chubb's coming off the board in Underdog, 14th overall. Looking at FFPC, a bit of a better value, but not by much, coming in 15th overall. But as soon as we hit ESPN, Yahoo, and even NFL.com, what I would say most people draft on, at least ESPN and Yahoo, you could throw Sleeper in there as well. But looking at those ADPs, he's coming off the board 8th overall, 6th overall, in an NFL.com draft's 5th overall. That doesn't even make sense to me, guys. To be fair though, I don't think anybody that takes fantasy football all that serious or plays in any competitive leagues really chooses or opts to draft on NFL.com. But even looking at ESPN and Yahoo, 6th overall, 8th overall, these are real ADPs that you guys are going to see in drafts. Now, typically when a player has an ADP so high that is near the order in which they fall off the board, obviously drafts are unpredictable and a player like Chubb could fall or be taken even higher than his current ADP. But the reason it's called average draft position is because that's truly where he's falling. First reactions, I'm sure a lot of people are gasping. Others that love Chubb think maybe that's a fair ADP, but for most of us out there that do think that's a bit egregious, we should be looking at it in a positive light, knowing that anybody that takes Nick Chubb higher than we would draft him, that's going to present much more value for us, and especially in the first round where one pick makes all the difference. Let's say you're drafting 8th overall or 9th overall, and you're just hoping that one player makes it to you. Having someone like Nick Chubb that you may have ranked outside the top 10, much lower than the ADP, but in your draft, he actually comes off the board earlier than your pick. That could make all the difference in you securing the player you want or settling for the next best option. So the big question here is, what do I have against Chubb? And to be frank, nothing particular or personal. I did actually roster him and start him in a championship roster that I had last season, so I'm in no way biased. I actually thank Nick Chubb for what he did last season through 12 games, and even despite playing on 3/4 of his season, he still finished as the RB9 on the back of 190 rush attempts, 1,067 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, 18 targets, 16 receptions, another 150 receiving yards, bringing his total yards from scrimmage up over 1,200. So considering he played in just a mere 12 games and scored 12 times, posted over 1,200 yards, this was a player who on average was putting up 1 touchdown and 100 rushing yards per game. So even though he finished as the RB9 in 2020, when you look at what he did on a per game basis, he was actually the RB7. So with him being drafted between the 6th to the 8th overall pick, is it all that egregious if he repeats that production? No, it wouldn't be, but we basically said it there. He would have to repeat that insane efficiency and production. Nick Chubb, despite actually producing 12 touchdowns and 1,200 yards, 101 touchdown per game, this was accomplished on the back of massive efficiency. What do I mean by that? Well, he ranked 28th in overall opportunity rating, despite finishing as the RB7 in fantasy points per game. And when it comes to snaps at the running back position, he ranked 28th as well. So you're talking about a running back outside RB2 territory when it comes to overall volume, overall opportunity, and snaps. And as talented as he is, if you were to tell me that in 2021 he were to finish in the same range, even if he were to be the RB20 when it comes to opportunity, I don't know if I would feel comfortable drafting him so highly, especially when you consider that all of his work is mostly on the ground. Nick Chubb finishing 7th in rushing yards on the season, but 43rd in receiving yards, 56th in total receptions. And while he didn't have a single drop, so that was a positive note, Kareem Hunt is going to be returning and is going to be the primary receiving back, which is largely why he did play on such a limited snap share. And with Nick Chubb going down with an injury and being a 1-2 punch to Kareem Hunt, the odds of him seeing a massive uptick in volume, it's just unlikely because they do want to make sure he's healthy. The Cleveland Browns, as crazy as it is to say, they do have playoff aspirations. They made it there last season. Nick Chubb, a large piece of their offense. They're going to need him down the stretch, and keeping him healthy is going to be priority number 1. For those reasons, him being drafted that high, I really can't buy into that. We do have him ranked as the RB11 though, so if he happens to fall down to that range, then I would feel comfortable taking him there. But the unfortunate reality we live in is that Nick Chubb is unlikely to fall. Alright guys, we're moving on to the next player, the next position, and we're moving to the tight end position, and the big name you want to avoid this year is going to be TJ Hockenson of the Detroit Lions. I believe out of all 4 players in this video, TJ Hockenson, you can make the greatest argument that maybe he isn't the largest name at the tight end position, but I'm not going to sit here and bash players that I'm pretty high on, that being any of the big 3, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, George Kittle. Nothing against those guys. And even looking down the position, Mark Andrews, rookie Kyle Pitts, of course it would be easy to make a case against him, but Mark Andrews I'm high on. Kyle Pitts I have no problem with you drafting. It certainly takes balls of steel, but hey, I'm not against it. TJ Hockenson, however, he is falling in a weird stage of the draft though, where he is being compared to those players, Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, at least when you're talking overall draft capital. Currently TJ Hockenson is right behind him, coming off the board as the TE6, and this is coming off of his sophomore breakout season, receiving 101 targets across 16 games, converting that into 67 receptions, 723 receiving yards to go along with 6 receiving touchdowns. I know hearing those numbers, 67 receptions, 723 receiving yards, it doesn't sound so glamorous, but when we're talking the tight end position, this was actually an area where TJ Hockenson ranked 4th if we're talking receptions, 3rd if we're talking receiving yards, which makes it all that much more impressive when you realize he only played on the 15th most snaps at the position. Imagine with a full workload like he is in line for this upcoming season, Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay, no longer on the roster, this team desperate to fill the wide receiver position, and until they figure that position out, TJ Hockenson is going to be a safety net between the 20s. That all sounds good and glamorous, and there is some upside to a TJ Hockenson pick. He was actually a player that I featured earlier on in this offseason in a high upside video. If everything actually goes his way and TJ Hockenson receives a Darren Waller type workload, which is in the range of outcomes, TJ Hockenson Hockenson will be competing or pushing for top 5 numbers, even creeping up to that top 3 type upside. The one thing people fail to realize though is an increase in targets doesn't necessarily mean that TJ Hockenson will retain his efficiency. In fact, it should be the complete opposite. With no real threats at the wide receiver position, defenses can focus more on TJ Hockenson, a player that should be one of the lone bright spots in this passing offense. And until one of the other wide receivers either makes a name for themselves or tries to break out, TJ Hockenson may be in an uphill battle. Think Evan Engram last season, a player who received a massive target share, but really when you break it down, he didn't do all that much with it. TJ Hockenson, the reason he was so glamorous last season was he played on the 15th most snaps. Despite that, produced top 5 numbers in many major categories. And I do feel that most people who draft TJ Hockenson with the expectation of that type of upside may be disappointed when they realize that these targets aren't equaling fantasy points. You're moving from Matthew Stafford to Jared Goff, downgrade there. Overall offense, scoring opportunities, downgrade that as well. And even though it's going to be a positive game script because the Lions defense is bad and the offense is going to be playing from behind, sustained drives are likely going to be few and far between. So like I mentioned, an Evan Engram-esque season for TJ Hockenson cannot be ruled out. For that, I do think that the tight end 6, while a fair ranking for him, the same spot that we have him ranked, it's not a position in the draft that I'm looking to target in that range. Typically, when TJ Hawkinson's coming off the board, I'm either drafting a quarterback that's in that Kyler Murray range. There's also the high upside wide receivers like Brandon Ayuk, and with similar players that can be drafted in the later stages of the draft like Tyler Higbee and Logan Thomas, it just doesn't make a ton of sense for me to invest such early round draft capital into a player like TJ Hockenson. Sure, he can surprise us and he is going to be in line for a massive opportunity, but I do see it as possibly a trap and I'm hoping none of you guys fall victim. Alright guys, we're moving to the next position, the wide receiver position, and this has been a player that we haven't brought up all that much throughout this offseason, so some of you newer viewers may not know exactly where we stand on this player. The next guy up, it's Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers, currently coming off the board as the wide receiver 10. Looking at overall rankings and average draft position though, 26 in Underdog, 26 in FFPC, 32nd overall in ESPN, so actually a bit of a value there as compared to the other platforms. 27th in Yahoo though, so don't expect to get a deal on that one. But if you just so happen to play on NFL.com, you can also get him on 32nd, much like you can on ESPN. I think the first thing we need to do to clear the air is just state exactly how massive a gap is of 6 spots going from 26th overall to 32nd overall at this stage of the draft. We're talking 6 overall picks here, and that may not sound all that much, but if you consider that on some platforms with him coming off the board 26 overall, that only 2 people in the 3rd round would have the ability to draft him as compared to if he was coming off the board 32nd overall, nearly every person in the 3rd round would have the ability to draft Keenan Allen. Similarly to what I mentioned with Nick Chubb, how a few spots makes a massive difference, we're hoping for that one player to fall to us, and let's say hypothetically you had the 30th overall pick and your target was Keenan Allen. If I were to tell you heading into that draft that he was coming off the board with an ADP of 32nd overall, and you would probably feel really good about your chances of getting him there, somebody would have to reach in order to undercut you. But let's say for instance he had an ADP of the wide receiver 26 and you were drafting with the 30th overall pick, well in that case you probably wouldn't feel so confident. That's just to show you an example of how massive a gap there that is between the platforms. So big shout out to our ADP guide. That's on our website, completely free. No membership necessary, so check that out. If you guys are preparing for your draft, you don't need to be a member. Use this as a tool, a resource. Next season, I'm pretty sure it won't be free, so take advantage while you can. Rewinding a bit back though to Keenan Allen specifically and what I project for him this season, I'm not all that down on him. I do suspect he should produce very similarly to what he did last season. Justin Herbert was a rookie, albeit one of the best rookies, if not the best passing rookie of all time, which is actually the reason why I'm a bit more apprehensive on boosting Keenan Allen so much over what he did last season. Through 14 games last season, Keenan Allen commanded a respectable 147 targets, an average of over 10 per game, which is completely massive, especially considering a rookie was passing him the ball. Rookie volume typically on the lower side. That trend bucked last season with Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, but just something we have seen historically. Heading into 2021 though, I expect much of the same. I wouldn't be surprised for him to hover around that 10 target per game mark. I would expect slightly reduced numbers though, because as good as Justin Herbert was in his rookie season when it comes to fantasy, the LA Chargers still weren't playing winning football, and heading into this season, the coaching staff isn't going to be coming in saying, we need to repeat and get Keenan Allen that many targets he did last season. No, they're fine with reducing volume in certain areas as long long as the offense is efficient, scoring on drives effectively, and those third and fourth quarters that Justin Herbert was coming from behind in many circumstances, if you ask the coaching staff of the LA Chargers, I'm sure they would prefer to have 0 games repeat like that. For that reason, even if Justin Herbert improves, that doesn't necessarily mean an uptick in volume. In fact, I would say there is a equally strong chance that there is a reduction in volume, and if there is, there would need to be an uptick in efficiency, a pretty massive one. Despite receiving 147 targets and catching 100 balls, Keenan Allen only compiled 992 receiving yards, failing to crack that elusive 1,000-yard receiving mark. His touchdowns a bit higher than they were on his career. Typically in that 4 to 6 range, we saw that up in the 8 area, but again, that could also be a factor looked at of an area of possible regression. Keenan Allen, he has a long history and sample of what he does in the red zone, and let's be frank, catching touchdowns has never really been the strength of the skill set of Keenan Allen, a player that despite ranking 5th in receptions, ranked 34th in receiving yards. Those big play touchdowns we see from Mike Williams and other receivers like Justin Jefferson, you don't really see those often for Keenan Allen, and those are going to end up being the difference makers between a player finishing with 6 receiving touchdowns and a player finishing with 9+. Allen, though, he's no new player in the league. I think we all to this point have either owned him in one season or another or have faced him plenty of times to know what he provides for a team. A player much better suited for your wide receiver 2 slot, at least when it comes to consistency. A player who has a high completion percentage when it comes to his targets, short and intermediate routes, ranking 34th in completed air yards, 33rd in unrealized air yards. A shocking gap between what he finished when it comes to receiving yards and reception, ranking a shocking gap between what he finished when it comes to receiving yards, receptions, ranking 16th and 5th in both of those areas. So seeing him finish 34th and 33rd in the areas of air yards, it just goes to show you exactly how utilized he is in the short and intermediate routes, relying on his yards after catch. Speaking of, an area where he ranked 10th. So if we're looking for improvement in the areas he's already strong in, I doubt he's going to increase much over 100 receptions, even if everything goes his way. On top of that, the receiving yards, we know just due to where he's targeted on the field, it's going to be difficult for him to improve all that much from 16th. And when it comes to yards after catch, ranking 10th, very respectable, but again, that's one of the higher marks that Keenan Allen has had throughout his entire career. And on top of that, this was on a season in which he finished under 1,000 receiving yards. So with many of his major stats being so feast or famine, the strengths of his being much more feast, and the weaknesses easily highlighted, it's difficult to imagine that he improves in the areas he's already strong in or gets worse in the areas he's weak in. One could only hope that he improves in his areas of weakness and potentially changes his game, but can we really expect that out of his second year with a new quarterback, Justin Herbert? What can we even expect out of him in year 2? So there's just a ton of question marks for a player going in a position in the draft where there aren't many question marks surrounding all the players. Alright guys, we're going to be moving into the final position, the quarterback position, but before we do, just wanted to shout out that giveaway. Don't forget, go to Apple Podcasts, get your sister's phone, your girlfriend's phone, your friend's phone, put a rating and review, leave your Twitter handle, and you could walk away with a draft package this week. That's not just a regular draft package, we'll give you the all-in package, which includes sports betting picks, DFS picks, all in-season access. We're gonna hook you up, and we'll make sure to get it to you before your draft. Just leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts, 5 stars please, and we'll be going through, selecting a few of you, and granting you guys that draft package and welcoming you to the community with open arms. I believe the only true qualifier for this is that you need to be a subscriber, which pretty sure most of you out there are. If you're not, we're on the road to 100k subscribers, so very close to hitting our goal, which was very close to actually hitting that goal, which was for the start of the NFL season. So if you're looking at our subscribers and we're not at 100k yet and we're close to the NFL season and you're not subscribed, be the hero, help us out, get us to that 100k mark. You best believe we'll be grateful for it. But like I said guys, enter this giveaway. We'll be checking throughout the week, highlighting a few of you guys out there and granting you guys draft packages. So don't miss out if you haven't got a draft package yet, but just keep in mind the amount of giveaway winners is going to be limited, so don't rely on this. You can always get your own draft package at our website, The Fantasy Football Advice, link in description for that. Alright guys, we're moving into the final position, the quarterback position, and don't consider this a cop-out please, because believe me, this did have thought into it, and it is actually Justin Herbert of the LA Chargers. No, I didn't just pick him because I'm down on Keenan Allen. Justin Herbert, if you followed us for a while, has been a player we've been a bit more critical on for many of the reasons that I tried to evade a little bit when talking about Keenan Allen to save a bit of face and give a bit of analysis for Justin Herbert specifically, but his rookie season was nothing short of phenomenal. While typically quarterbacks from year 1 to year 2 see a massive step forward when it comes to efficiency, fantasy points per game, touchdown rate, and overall fantasy production, Justin Herbert was a player who finished as the 7th overall quarterback last season. That was a season in which he didn't even start all 16 games, so for him to accomplish that for fantasy football, the bar is certainly set high. And with him having an average draft position of the 7th overall quarterback off the board, unlike last season where we could take him off the waiver wire and really enjoy that upside, we're now paying for all the risk associated with the pick. Justin Herbert, if we would have drafted him last season as the 7th overall quarterback, his fantasy season as a whole wouldn't have seemed as miraculous as it was, being a player we could get off the waiver wire with such low expectations overall. Rookies don't tend to really be that strong for fantasy, especially ones that don't rely heavily on their rushing production. Justin Herbert had a nice mix of both, but what was most impressive with him was definitely his passing ability. Now, heading into this season, he's losing out on Hunter Henry. Mike Williams, unfortunately, already injured, but can't say we're 100% surprised with that there, which really leaves Keenan Allen, rookie Josh Palmer, an aging, very old Jared Cook, unlikely to be very much of a factor, and Mike Williams, if he can be healthy, and we'll see how many games he plays. It just seems to me like the pieces around him do have to remain healthy for him to exceed his draft position. If a few of those pieces do go down with an injury, like Austin Eckler did last season, Mike Williams for a short stretch, those are the types of things I think Justin Herbert could deal with and potentially meet his ADP, but I do think that is a more likely outcome. And when you're drafting players in the draft, you really don't want to target players that are going to meet their ADP. There are countless players you can draft in many stages if you want to target a QB early, middle, or late, where you can find players that have a strong chance to exceed their draft position. Keep in mind the way that we get an overall advantage against our opponents is always going to come down to these slight advantages at each position. Getting a quarterback you draft at the QB 10 who produces as the QB 5, massive advantage over your opponent who drafts the QB 7 and finishes as the QB 7 because you took your quarterback several rounds later, yet still got much more production out of the position, meaning not only do you have an advantage at the QB position, but you also have an advantage at your other positions that you were able to stack up on earlier in the draft. Combine enough of those types of players and values with some waiver wire magic, maybe a trade or two, and you got yourself a fantasy championship. Think about it. Players like Justin Herbert last season, undrafted, Stephon Diggs, a 6th round wide receiver, finishing in the top 5, David Montgomery as well, 4th rounder, but at the RB position. Could we have asked for a much later ADP? I don't think so. These are the types of players giving you an advantage over your opponents each and every week, and those are the players ultimately that are going to be league winners. Justin Herbert simply doesn't have the tools, in my opinion, to be that league winner. If I'm investing early in the quarterback position, as early as QB 7 where he's going, I'm taking other options like Kyler Murray a bit earlier, Dak Prescott in the exact same range, or who knows, maybe I might opt to just take the value at the other players like Ryan Tannehill later in the draft, who has a very strong chance of competing with Justin Herbert when it comes to fantasy production, and I don't think all of us would be surprised if Ryan Tannehill actually exceeds him. But guys, call to action. Who are your big name players to avoid? Let us know in the comment section down below. Also, leave us a 5-star rating and review. Get yourself a draft package. Don't forget, don't miss out. This is going to be a short offer because drafts are coming up. We want to get you guys the package so you can prepare. Leave a 5-star rating and review. We'll be giving out those packages, but if you enjoyed, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.